Hi everyone, it's Margaret Manning here with 60 and Me. This is the place for women who are aging beautifully, where they come to be inspired. And we have lots of topics on our minds as we get close to retirement. And one of them is whether we're going to live where we are or retire abroad. And I've got two guests today that are going to help us to unravel these questions and really give us an insight into what your options are. My first guest is Susan Haskins. Susan is a senior editor for International Living. She writes about retiring abroad. And with her husband, Dan Prescher, who is sitting next to her, she has lived in Ecuador, Panama, Yucatan, all over the world, and has explored dozens of different places where you might want to retire. She is the co-author with Dan of a book called Live Richer, Spend Less. It's the International Living's ultimate guide to retiring overseas. So welcome, Susan.
Hi, thank you.
And Dan, you are Susan's husband and also an International Living senior editor. He has a degree in journalism and creative writing, and he writes about expat living overseas. He is the master of ceremonies at International Living's events all over the world, and also has written articles in any number of places, New York Times, Fortune Magazine, Forbes, AARP, just a great proponent of talking about this business of retiring overseas. So welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Margaret. Nice to be here.
It's lovely to have both of you here. And I am an avid follower of your work and have been for years, because I really do think that International Living offers great resources. But Susan, could you tell us a bit about IL and what you do, what your mission is, and kind of, where you're going with your business, with the business?
Right. Well, our overall concept is that you can live better for less if you look beyond your borders. Yeah. And International Living was funded 40 years ago. So this is something that we've been doing for 4 decades now, and something we feel that we know a little bit about. So it's really it's this time of life when you want this great adventure, but you also tend to be budget conscious. So you want to look for a place that's a good fit for you, where your money will go farther and where you can have the time of your life. And that's what we try to help people do.
Yeah. Well, this is a really great conversation, and we're going to have several chats about different aspects of retiring abroad, but I wanted to focus on that particular issue of saving money. I mean, that's the title of the book, Live Richer, Spend Less. And Dan, maybe you can tell us a bit about what the book is, covering, and what your purpose was in writing it, because saving money, you're right, Susan, is so important to the women in our community.
Yeah, there's a general feeling that if you move to someplace else, you can live for less money. But we wanted to quantify it in the book. Right. There are places you can go and actually cut your cost of living in half or more because of the savings on utilities, on property taxes, especially on healthcare. So when you actually put numbers on those things for people, it kind of brings it into focus for them. And that's that savings and the places where that's possible, kind of what the book was about.
Well, tell me, I actually did take a look at the book, and it's really well done, because it's not 1,500 pages. It's a concise book which it dives right in fact, to the finances. So let's talk about some of the key areas of expense. Like, for example, you mentioned healthcare. Give us some examples of places you've lived or that you've written in the book about, and just give us a level set on healthcare, for example.
Well, if you read our chapters on healthcare, you'll see that we recommend there are many places that have actually rated as having a higher quality of healthcare than the United States, for example. And that's really important. You don't want to go somewhere where the quality of healthcare is less than, when it comes to your health, it's really important to have good care. But you can find, for instance, France has always been rated as having one of the best healthcare systems and healthcare services in the world. And it can be far less than in the United States. I think, a hip replacement in the United States can run up into the tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes $100,000, where in France it might be $12,000. So you're at an almost 5 times savings. There are other countries. I mean, we have been able to see a doctor in Ecuador, for instance, just walk in without an appointment and see a doctor for $10. Yeah. Prescription medicines are remarkably less expensive overseas than they are in the U.S. So, again, I mean, we have lots of examples like this in the book.
So another area, of course, is housing. I mean, just living where you're going to live. I mean, let's look at that too, because I think that how can we save money based on your experience, Dan? Maybe you can give us some examples on the housing front.
Uh, just in general, real estate tends to be less expensive, especially in the places that Susan and I have lived for the past 19 years throughout Latin America. The cost of a good quality house without giving up any of the comforts of home is just cheaper throughout most of Latin America than it is in the United States or Canada. Add to that the fact that you probably don't need nearly as many utilities. One place that we lived in, Cotacachi, Ecuador, we needed neither heating nor air conditioning. Just take that off the top of your budget and see what that does to your bottom line. And property taxes, even where we lived in Omaha, Nebraska before moving out of the country, property taxes were thousands of dollars a year. We owned a condo in Cotacachi, Ecuador, and paid
$53 a year is what our property taxes were. And if you pay in the first 3 months of the year, you get a discount, especially a senior discount. So it can
sometimes
be really...
sometimes the savings are just ridiculous. And unless you've gone abroad or you have access to that kind of information, you just don't know where those places are and how much you can save.
Well, this is what I actually do like about international living is that they've got people on the ground in these places. I mean, you obviously are writing for them. You've lived in many, many places, but other people too are contributing writers to their platform. And they are, they're going to the markets and buying the fish and, and going to the doctors and real advice. And the book does actually cover everything. I was actually surprised in such a small book in the detail that you like line items. So healthcare, housing. What about things like just local food and eating out and that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the food.
Okay.
You're going to be far healthier, likely when you live overseas if you shop at the local markets. They're not shipping things halfway across the country or halfway across the world that's put in a cooler when it's not ripe and sent to you. So it's far healthier.
Right.
Most of the stuff comes right out of the farmer's land the morning you buy it or right off the fisherman's boat. So you're going to be living far healthier. And those things are far less expensive because you don't have all those transportation and handling costs. Going out to eat. I mean, we can go out to eat in both Ecuador and Mexico. We're residents of Mexico now. And for $25, have a fabulous meal, including wine in some cases. Sometimes, wine and dessert. It's extraordinary. We can go to lunch in Mexico, for instance, have a couple of tacos, really fresh, homemade, a couple of beers, and spend less than $10 for the both of us. So it's almost a case where it's more expensive to cook for yourself at home. So why not go out and enjoy yourself?
We actually talk about on 60 and Me about practicing retirement, because I mean, just when you get to the point where you want to retire and just go to your passions and maybe start, a career, a new business, or you want to get into your crafts or whatever, we ask just what is the money that you've actually got to work with? And, and then be realistic. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they're going to probably outlive their money if they don't start early thinking about cutting back. So, I mean, do you think that's a piece of advice you would give people to start early thinking about, how you want to live in retirement?
Absolutely. And practicing is great. We always suggest that if you know where you want to go and you want to try it out, do it long enough so that it's not a vacation anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You're not spending on those big vacation items that cost a lot of money. Live like a local as long as you possibly can. That'll show you where the savings are. That'll show you the best farmers markets to buy at, how to save that money. And the practice is hugely important because trying before you buy is a big thing, especially if you're going to move abroad.
Now, you are the MC at a lot of events around the world that International Living does. Would you say that would be a good thing for people to do, to perhaps come to one of the events? I've never been myself, but I don't know what goes on, but I presume it's an overview of places and these kinds of questions?
It's a terrific way to get your boots on the ground, especially if the conference is someplace you're thinking about retiring.
Mm-hmm.
Panama or Belize. We have an upcoming Belize conference.
Right.
Ecuador. We've been to Quito, Costa Rica. Getting your boots on the ground is a great way to start. The conferences themselves are only 2.5, 3 days. But if you have the opportunity to take some time before or after and explore the territory, it can be a great opportunity.
Right. Well, that in itself is a way of saving money too, because you that won't make the mistake of thinking that you can live within this range when you can only afford something less than that. So, keeping with the finance theme, tell us about some of the financial traps that you might fall into, things that you need to be careful about when you're making a decision to go abroad.
It's not the case. You can significantly lower your cost of living, but it's not the case that the instant you walk off the plane in Quito or Merida, you instantly cut your budget in half. You need a cushion. You need about 6 months worth of expenses for legal costs, for getting your visa, for rent deposit, for finding those places where it's cost effective to shop, because you might be eating in a restaurant for the first week or two that you're there.
Right.
And it takes some time to get your legs under you and find out where the bargains are and do the shopping. That's just one thing to prepare for.
And even if you find a furnished rental, you're probably going to want to add some personal touches.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You have, all of those initial costs that you would have anywhere in the world that you're moving. So I agree. You need to have a little cushion.
A buffer, yeah.
Yeah, and another thing I think is important, we were talked a little bit about this, is finding the right place for you. If you want to move, if budget is a really, really important consideration, then you may be looking at Latin America or Southeast Asia, somewhere where the living expenses are really low.
Right.
And in those places, I would tend, if budget were really important to me, to look in the mountain locations, like Dan said.
Away from the beaches, yeah.
Yeah, because electricity can be expensive, and you're going to want air conditioning, most likely. Yeah. So we have found the most comfortable living to be in the mountains in the tropics. But that might not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's a way to save money too.
Yeah. It sounds like one of the things that also to look out for these days is that more and more people are retiring abroad, and they may get taken advantage of by people who are looking to sell them land or mislead them about how to settle, how to get their feet on the ground. And what advice do you give to people in that respect?
That's another good point. The best piece of advice is probably to not go with a real estate agent or a financial advisor who just speaks English, just because they speak English. Find a good local resource. And if you need to bone up on your Spanish or your Portuguese or your French to do that, that's a good reason.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Find somebody who's been in business a good long time and has a good reputation. And one way to do that is by asking the local expat community. You can you'll find out very soon who the good eggs are and who the rotten eggs are.
Yes.
And, proceed with caution.
Reputation is huge in many of the countries that we've lived in.
Right.
Since there is no Better Business Bureau, there's no multiple listing service or real estate. Right. Reputation goes a long way, and you can quickly find out who's got a good reputation and who doesn't.
No, I think that's super. That's really valuable to hear that. I think that, people get so excited about being in this new place and they get a great offer and it's like, oh my goodness. But, the world is a funny place these days. You've got to be super careful. I'm hearing voices from my community though in my ear, and we'll talk about this in a couple of other conversations. But, yes, Margaret, Dan, Susan, we're talking about all these really great places, but they've got problems. They've got political problems. They've got, it's not secure. When money, they're going to steal my money or whatever. I mean, what has been your experience? You've lived all over the world, and what kind of advice?
First of all, do you think the United States doesn't have political problems?
Well, not just United States. The whole Western world is like in crazy transitions. Yeah, no, it's true. But it's different when you don't speak the language. When you don't speak 100% clear the language.
And I think that can be intimidating for people. And it can be intimidating to go somewhere, especially if you haven't traveled a lot. I think if you have traveled a lot, that we as people have similar similar desires, needs, and wants, and we're more similar than we are different.
Yeah.
In many of the countries that we write about, especially the larger countries, for instance, Mexico sometimes gets a bad rap in the press.
Yes.
Sometimes deservedly and sometimes not deservedly. But there are communities like Merida, where we lived for many years, that are actually safer than most, even smaller cities, in the United States.
Yeah.
Far safer, statistically safer. So again, you have to sort of do your research, think about where you want to go. You're probably not going to gravitate to those places that are somewhat dangerous or perceived as dangerous, even though they might not be.
Again, ask around. If there's an expat community there, you will quickly find out where the problem areas are and where they aren't. And the advice of expats and local friends is invaluable in determining that. It's good to err on the side of caution. You don't want to move to a place and think, oh, this is Mayberry RFD, that nobody locks their doors, nobody closes their windows.
Yeah.
Err on the side of caution, but sooner or later, you'll relax. You'll learn your way around. The old adage, it's the devil you know, is true.
Yes.
There are so many dangers and pitfalls in the United States that you don't even think about because you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
You're just not familiar with them in another country.
And also International Living, of course, provides incredible resources. I mean, I have no, vested interest. You are a sponsor of 60andMe, so we know about your business. But I've looked at your research and your reports, and they are incredibly comprehensive. And all these questions that we've been talking about have been asked, and answered. So I would encourage you to check out the website. And do you have your own website? So how would somebody reach you if they wanted to get in touch? Was it internationalliving.com?
Always get to us to the International Living website. Yeah, internationalliving.com. I think all of the editors are listed there. We're pretty available.
Okay. I'm really glad we had this conversation on money. I think that the finances of retiring abroad is a very big draw, but there's also things to be careful about in terms of entering into business negotiations and just being, like you said several times, informed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this conversation. We're going to talk about other aspects of retiring overseas. If you've got any questions for Susan or Dan, please leave them in the section below. We'd love to get your feedback on your experiences, and they'll be checking the questions and leaving answers for us, and we'll look forward to your feedback. So if you're looking to travel or retire abroad, or even travel abroad for the short term, like Dan said, please check out International Living and the book. Where's the book? This title is so literature spends as International Living's ultimate guide to living overseas. But it actually is a really useful resource. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Our Patreon supporters help us to make a bigger difference in the lives of women over 60 all around the world. They get exclusive videos, live video shows, discounts, and much more. So please look for the link on this page. It is somewhere down here, up there. And join our tribe of women in our 60andMe community who are actually making a big difference in the world, challenging aging stereotypes. So thank you so much for your support.